governors, faculty members, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our first TED sessions of this year's annual Board of Meeting. I would like to tell you a little about myself, and I hope you find my story interesting. My name is Tamar Truzman, and I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders. I was born and raised in Jerusalem to a very poor ultra-Orthodox family with 17 souls, with me being the sixth. And I started having doubts about this way of life early in my teenage years. And I started dreaming about one day setting foot on a university campus. My parents strongly insisted that I lead a religious life. And I was very pro-educated in the Haredi schools. At the age of 19, I decided to run away from my parents' house and start a life of my own. I worked hard to complete my pro-education, and I was lucky to be enrolled in a university prep course here at the university. After graduating this program, I started my BA in Communication Sciences and Disorders. And during my studies, I was honored to be enrolled in the Dean's List, and I graduated summa cum laude. My family wasn't there to support me, and there were times where I had to work in 3 jobs in parallel to make it possible. But I could never have graduated without the support I received here in this university. I clearly remember one day when I went to the scholarship section, and I was crying that I must stop my studies because I can't afford it. And there, I'm excited to speak about it, but there I got a big hug, and I got a scholarship, and a room at the dorms, and mental support, and I can easily say this university is a home to me, and I owe a debt of gratitude to many people in this place. Thank you. Thank you. My dissertation title is Interhemispheric Brain Connectivity Changes Following Language Rehabilitation in Patients with Post-Stroke Aphasia, which I'm doing with the supervision of Professor Tali Bitan from the Department of Psychology and Dr. Michal Biran from the Communication Sciences and Disorder Department. So moving to today we are here to learn in the best possible way through seeing and listening to the experts themselves. And what a treat we have for you today. Today with us, we have ocean royalty, better known as her deepness. We have an expert on all things tsunami who calls the University of Haifa home, and a University of Haifa and global authority on all things internet, and I do mean everything. So let us begin. We have much to learn today. Our first speaker will be receiving an honorary doctorate from the university this evening. She is a protector of the ocean and a prolific and gifted researcher. Please welcome the incomparable Dr. Sylvia Earle, who will give us a glimpse into her world in a lecture titled About the Ocean.
It is a great honor, a deep honor for me to be here with you today and later today to become a part of the family. And right now I want to share with you just a few moments of why I have been lured into the sea and why I hope I can lure you there too. So when I first began splashing around in the ocean as a little girl on the coast of New Jersey and then later in the Gulf of Mexico and Florida, but as a scientist starting in the 1950s, learning how to dive, what impressed me the most was the life in the sea. It is not just rocks and water. Earth is a geochemical phenomenon, a miracle in a universe where life, as far as we know it, does not exist. So diving into the ocean, I discovered very early on, is like diving into the history of life on Earth. The variations on the theme of animals as we define them, the file of animals, essentially they're all there in the ocean. Only about half have made it to terrestrial and freshwater environments. Jellyfish, have you ever seen one on the land? Plankton of the sky? There are a few in freshwater, but the great majority are in the ocean. That's also, I now know, and most of us, if you dig through the evidence, know that it's the ocean where the little green things generate most of the oxygen in our atmosphere, and it wasn't always this way. Photosynthesis came about 2.5 billion years ago. Earth has been around 4.5 billion years. So it took a while to generate the oxygen and to develop the cycles of life that make our lives possible. Diving into the ocean, I have come to understand, is diving into our life support system, that which keeps life as we know it intact. So, it starts with photosynthesis, at least life as we know it. There are lots of creatures that got by perfectly well without photosynthesis, in the dark, dining on sulfur, dining on the chemistry of what was around, but not needing oxygen. But we need oxygen, so we're glad that those little diatoms and coccolithophorids and prochlorococcus exist in the ocean, and so are other forms of life in the sea, the zooplankton, the soup, the small stages of creatures. Imagine if the birds did the counterpart, there'd be eggs flying around here in the atmosphere. In the ocean, the fish mostly, not all, but mostly release eggs or their young that spend time in the atmosphere that we call ocean. So many variations on the theme of life just in a bucket full of water. It's a zoo out there. I mean, looking at the surface, it looks like just water with rocks around the edge, rocks on the bottom, but it's life in the ocean. It's the water that makes life possible, but it's life that makes our existence possible. I love diving into the sea when I can watch the chemistry of the ocean in action, the nutrient cycles in motion. It's an eat and be eaten world out there. It is everywhere, of course, but you really see it and feel it when you're watching it and hoping not to be becoming a part of the action. There's sharks, there are dolphins, there are birds, there are big fish, there are tuna, there are little fish, and it all goes back to photosynthesis. The sun shining on the earth that makes photosynthesis, the generation of oxygen, the production of food possible. And the glory of being able to dive in. And I have been able to dive in, not just in and out, but to stay underwater. I've lived underwater now on 10 different occasions. That means you go and stay in an underwater house, underwater laboratory, but you don't stay inside the way most astronauts do in the space station. You get to go through a nice little hole in the floor and swim out into the ocean and spend 8, 10 hours, 12 hours a day and night to explore, to get to know the creatures who live there. Using the ocean as a laboratory instead of bringing creatures back to the surface, to take yourself below the surface and get to see up close and personal what's going on. But breathing compressed air as a scuba diver or living underwater, even breathing exotic mixes of gases, you're limited how deep our physiology can take us under pressure. So, like astronauts don't have to put up with living in a vacuum high in the sky, they wrap themselves in a protective suit. So some clever characters back in the 1920s figured out how to wrap people into metal suits that protected them from the pressure, the high pressure that is as unfriendly as no pressure at all. So I had a chance to use this system called Jim, named after the first person willing to put it on, Jim Jarrett. And many years after that first exploratory series of dives in a one atmosphere suit, It was 1979 when I had a chance to actually try it. And it inspired me to work with engineers to try to figure out how can a scientist get underwater with systems so easy to drive that even a scientist can do it. And so I parted ways a bit with my fellow scientists and helped start first one, then two, then three companies to develop technologies for the purpose of ocean exploration, for the purpose of using the ocean as a laboratory. It's beginning to take off. There are tourist submarines, of course they're Navy submarines, but they usually don't have windows. And their purpose is not so much exploring the ocean, it's more a matter of security and defense. But there is a place for ocean exploration. I really long for the day when there'll just be dozens, hundreds of these little things, so that little kids, CEOs, fishermen, you, anybody, any member of the family, no matter what age, can go out into the ocean, under the ocean. And yes, we have remotely operated systems, which are very cool. The little ventures that I have started have literally built hundreds of these systems to serve science and exploration. But there's another place, that we just need to take ourselves as well as our instruments, just as we have high in the sky satellites, but we also have astronauts. I try to imagine Jane Goodall trying to get to know her chimpanzees by flying over the head, lowering cameras or hooks or nets. Being in the ocean, being able to stay for hours, days, weeks, the way you take for granted you can on the land, is a gift of our time. We're just beginning to have the technological capability of embracing the ocean. And so far it's taking us just, the upper skin of the ocean, but over the years now, 3 times humans have made a maximum descent to full ocean depth. Astronauts laugh when you say, how deep is that? How far? It's 7 miles. It's 11 kilometers. It's as high as you fly a commercial aircraft. I came that high in the sky to come here. Millions of people have been that far high in the sky. Only 3 times have people made it to the great depths of the ocean. What are we waiting for? We need to get to know who lives there, not just on our plate, but where they live. One thing that has happened as a consequence of spending thousands of hours underwater, especially when, like Jane Goodall, you go to a place and you stay long enough to get to know individuals and see that they have faces, they have personality, they have a social system, they have a place. And when you take them out of the ocean, you leave a space that does not quickly get filled, because so many of the creatures that wind up on our plates take a long time to generate. Some of the fish that come to market are 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years old. So when you extract them, it takes a long while for the system to recover, if ever. Getting to know that fish like fish, that they have social relationships, that some fish partner for life, like some birds, like some people. It should not be a surprise. Fish have been around in the ocean for hundreds of millions of years. They are our fellow vertebrates. We have a backbone, they have a backbone. We have heart, they have heart. We've got a brain, they have brains. Well, some of us have brains. All fish do. And it's just a matter of getting to see them with new eyes, to experience them. If you don't know, you can't care. And of course, they will always wind up on our plate one way or the other. We eat birds, even though we don't eat wild birds so much. We have Kentucky fried birds, we have lots of chicken, lots of a few species that we cultivate, but most birds now we tend to leave as part of the wild that we have come to see with new eyes, new respect. Maybe we'll get there with fish. We have to hurry, because 90% of many of the big fish are already gone, lots of the little ones too. We have to think, what are we doing eating wildlife? It's not a matter of need as much as it is a matter of choice, because as omnivores, humans have lots of choices about what to eat, especially plants. But we've come to develop as a habit eating wildlife from the sea, including creatures who were never on our plates before the 20th century. But we've acquired that taste. So, fish, the biggest fish in the ocean, everyone an individual and identifiable by the spots on their back. You can take a photograph, send it into Whale Shark Central, and get an indication of who that shark is, where it has been, and where it might wind up. We're getting pretty good about a number of the species, tracking them. Once I got that in my head about fish, I realized that, oh, of course, all creatures, we know it with cats and dogs and horses, they're all individuals, no two exactly alike. It's true with starfish. It's true with squid, known to some as calamari once they're cooked. Variations on the theme of shrimp. No two individuals in your shrimp cocktail or your shrimp curry or whatever it is that are exactly alike. Everyone an individual with a place and a role in the ocean, and some with characteristics that I envy, like the stomatopod shrimp crustaceans, the mantis shrimp. They have eyes that can see a range of light like this, including the ultraviolet. In comparison, our capacity to see colors is quite limited. Instead, I see them in the Tokyo fish market. I see them in the Boston fish market. And every time I see one, I bow with respect, because they do things I can't do. In fact, the ocean is full of creatures that do things that we, if we only knew what superpowers exist out there, we might treat them with greater respect. The diversity of life on Earth is now under fire, as you perhaps know if you've been reading or listening to the news about 1 million of the species that make up our life support system on the land and in the sea are at risk of extinction on our watch. Some sooner than later, but by the end of this century, that is the estimate. And it could be greater, but it could be lesser, depending on what we do or fail to do. And it all comes back to knowing. When you look at the stars at night, oh, they're so beautiful. And you kind of want to go there to reach up and see what's out there in space. And it has driven us to go high in the sky and to finally look back on ourselves as part of the universe, not separate from it, a part of it. And it's right here under our feet, yet to be explored, yet to really be understood. That picture was taken about 50 years ago by a young astronaut who looked out the window during the Apollo 8 mission, making a circumnavigation around the moon, William Anders. And he said, we went to discover the moon, but what we found, what we discovered, was the Earth, that view of us called Earthrise, that has changed everything about the way we think of ourselves, knowing that's our island, that's our home, and everything on it connects to everything else. We dream of going to our sister planet Mars, and I suspect someday we'll get there. We've sent our probes there, landed on Mars. But to live there will be really hard. Why? It's all about the water. And scientists at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution have calculated that this is all the water there is. If you take all of the fresh water, all of the glaciers, all of the water in the atmosphere, all of the water in the ocean, you put it in one little blue ball, I mean, it looks so tiny compared to the size of the Earth. Average depth, though, is 2.5 kilometers, maximum 11 kilometers. And we, on the land, look out to the ocean and think of it as vast, infinite in its capacity to yield whatever we want to take out of it, or to take whatever we want to put into it, to throw things away in the ocean, not realizing until very recently that the most important thing that we take from the ocean is our existence. It's our life support system. And if we mess it up, we're really tearing into our future. And we have done it in ignorance. probably no single thing that humankind has ever done to alter the nature of nature more quickly or more drastically than has happened than our appetite that has come about fairly recently in the history of humankind to burn through the energy generated by burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas. And it has served us handsomely. I came here. Thank you, fossil fuels. We have much about this university. Thank you, fossil fuels. We have lights. We have power. We have food. We have the internet. We have astronauts in the sky because we have harnessed the power of fossil fuels. But the biggest gift of all is knowing we have to change our ways. Why? Because of the carbon dioxide, because of the methane that goes into the atmosphere, smothering the earth in a way with greenhouse gases, warming the planet. Bad news for creatures who live in polar seas. Bad news for polar bears, of course. Bad news for us. A warming planet becomes a less hospitable planet, even a deadly one. The other side of what fossil fuels have given us, those wonderful plastics that have infused our lives with so many benefits, but at the same time, we are seeing the downside. We didn't know, just as we did not know when we began to burn massive quantities of fossil fuels that there could be a downside. It was always about finding more, burning more, powering more. And it seemed that way with synthetic materials. There's no downside as far as we could see when we began in the 1950s to really amp up their production. We just didn't think it through. What do you do with them when you're through with them? Well, now we've got some answers. The ocean is giving back what we have tossed there or have allowed to flow there. I have been in some of the most pristine parts of the planet. In this case, I'm in a marine reserve off the coast of Costa Rica, Cocos Island, awash in an ocean of plastic. And again, I don't blame anyone for any of these things. None of us should. But now we know. And we can chart a better future armed with that most important thing that we've got going for us, which is knowledge, looking for evidence, finding the solutions. And I am so pleased to be here with a university with so many good minds looking at human culture, human civilization in the many dimensions of what make us special on the planet. But in particular, to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the Leon Charney School of Marine Sciences that is really dedicated to exploring, understanding, caring for the ocean, that will have benefits throughout all of the other aspects of what this university is really about. So yesterday morning, I had a chance, thanks to my colleague and my dive buddy sitting up here on the front row, Beverly Goodman, who took me out to explore her part of the universe here. We were actually at Caesarea, and we could see all the evidence of human civilization all about us, deep, deep history. And we also found evidence as we looked around and saw broken columns and bits and pieces. There was modern archaeology to be had. We found evidence of modern civilization, and we did a little bit of cleanup. It'll make it harder for future archaeologists to define the Plasticozoic era of human civilization. But there we were, doing our utmost. And it says something good about humankind. Once you know, you can change your way of thinking, way of doing things. It's not just what we're putting into the ocean in the way of warming temperatures, in the way of our plastic and other junk, in the way of pollutants that we are pouring into the sea, in the way of ocean acidification that is the terrible twin of the effects of carbon dioxide and warming. We have ocean acidification. But taking out of the ocean wildlife, the three big things that we can do to upend this planet, to unravel the systems that have taken 4.5 billion years to assemble, and it's taken us about 4.5 decades to disassemble through what we're putting into the ocean, what we're putting into the atmosphere, changing the temperature, changing the chemistry, and destroying wildlife. On the land, we got to a point and we decided, we have to save the birds. We have to have parks. We have to have protected areas. We don't want to lose these miraculous creatures who are part of our culture, part of our world. And actually, we're a part of their world because they were here first by millions of years. We are newcomers on this ancient living planet. But it didn't occur to us that there were limits to what we could take from the sea when we started to extract. Now we know 90% of the big fish are gone, many of the little ones too, in a matter of a few decades. We finally reached a point with whales where we had a choice. Will there or will there not be whales anymore? And we made the choice, we've got to stop killing them. We got down to a very low point with whales. But in 1986, by international agreement, most nations have stopped killing whales. There are more whales today than there were when I was a kid, more sea turtles than there were when I was a kid, because generally people have come to respect them for something other than groceries. I wonder if we'll get to that point with bluefin tuna in time. In the Pacific, their numbers are down to 3% of what they were when I was a child. In the Atlantic, that's a little bit better. The estimates are about 10%. But still, to go from here to here in decades, with populations that have lived compatibly with humans through long pieces of our history, and then suddenly, as I want to share with you, in this glimpse of your backyard, you probably recognize the Mediterranean, the shore, the sea, the rocks, the water, and the life that's there, a place that has deep human history, but an even much longer, much deeper history of life on Earth that we're just beginning to respect and to see with new eyes. Of course we value our own deep history, our culture. Where did we come from? Where are we going? We want to know about our predecessors, how they learned what they learned, language, art, music, the numbers that have given us the capacity to reach the high levels of prosperity that we enjoy. And yes, they put their junk in the ocean too. We can find it. It gives us answers to who they were, how they lived, what they valued. And here we are with a capacity to look with new eyes and new respect for what the ocean is all about, because for the first time in the history of human civilization, in the 20th century, we began to take the plunge. And thank you, Jacques Cousteau and Émile Gagnon, that engineer, explorer combination, to go and master what it takes to breathe underwater, to get up close and personal with the fish and with the sea urchins, with a history of life on Earth, the really deep history of life on Earth. And I love it that right here at the Charney School of Marine Sciences, just this week, last week, going even deeper than has been possible before, harnessing those new technologies and making incredible new discoveries right here in your front yard, that for all the time that people have lived in this part of the world over so many centuries, millennia, never until recently being able to see tuna as tuna see tuna, to get to know their social structure, to get to know how do they navigate over thousands of miles, know that they dive deep. They go down to the deep scattering layer, a layer of life that migrates near the surface at night and then sinks back during the day to the depths. That's where tuna go for their groceries, for the most part. But we have turned them into just pieces of meat. We value them dead. We need to consider their value as part of the living world that give back. Every living thing, of course, every animal consumes the world around them, but we give nutrients back to the system that powers in the ocean the phytoplankton, that powers the zooplankton, that powers the little fish, that power monk seals. You're so blessed here in the Mediterranean to have monk seals. But again, it was a choice. You have the power to kill every last one, but you've chosen to protect them. Maybe we will learn and come to the point of protecting some of the other creatures that are out there that now we only see as commodities. So I just want to thank all of you for making me part of your family. And yesterday to go diving with some of you, the new class of scientific divers at the School of Marine Sciences. It just gives me cause for hope. Just as I had a chance to meet with the President of the United States, George Bush, a few years ago and have a conversation about protecting the ocean. George Bush was not a notable champion for the environment, but he did turn out to be a champion on a grand scale for the environment, the ocean environment, and largely thanks, I think, to Laura Bush, who helped convince him that parks in the ocean were as good an idea, maybe a better idea, than parks on the land, because we need to protect our life support system. And I was there as a witness when he signed into law the largest marine protected area on the planet, and then to see that same area quadrupled in size by President Obama in 2016, and in that same year to see nations come together to protect the largest marine protected area on the planet so far, around Antarctica. We are on a roll. We're beginning to go from zero early in the 20th century in terms of protecting the ocean through conscious action, not just because it was too far, too remote for us to exploit. We're now consciously saying the ocean matters to every breath you take, every drop of water you drink. It's where the greatest diversity of life actually exists. So launching the idea 10 years ago, the same time this marine laboratory got started, the idea of Mission Blue, getting communities around the world to nominate places they love, care about, that should be marine parks as hope spots. So now there are 113 places around the world that have been designated through collaboration with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN, with a team of scientists who look at and review proposals that come in from all over the world, nominating places for protection, places that people make a commitment to do something to improve their particular blue backyard. And we're developing, literally, a network of hope. And that, I think, is what causes me to wake up every morning and say, yes, what's going to happen today? What more can we do? I met this olive tree just a couple of days ago. That meeting also gave me cause for hope, because it said that that tree has been around for 500 years. It's still there. We have shown that tree dignity and respect. For whatever reasons, it wasn't chopped down and made into bowls and dishes and spoons and things. If only that tree could talk. If only that tree could tell us the history that it has witnessed. It was 500 years ago that Magellan set out for the first circumnavigation of the planet. 50 years ago, first circumnavigation of the moon. What is ahead of us in the next 50 or 500 years? Actually, it's the next 10 years that are probably the most meaningful for us, because, as the climate scientists tell us, we will either make it or break it in the next 10 years. That's really cause for accelerating our respect for nature, accelerating whatever it takes to take the pressure off our life support system, give nature a break. We do have choices, and I'm so pleased to be among those who are dedicated to doing whatever it takes to make this planet, this blue part of the universe, a better place. Thank you.